Broadcasting live from Lothal. Good morning, Lothal. It's the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to Good Morning Lothal, the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. I'm your host, Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora.
How we doing, Rolly?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm okay, man. It's been a long weekend, but I had a lot to do. But as always, I will make time to do this because this is important. This is the world of Star Wars. This is where I thrive. This is what I love. What about you?
Yeah, likewise. I'm gonna be honest. Today, when I texted you, like, oh, hey, we're gonna record today, just to kind of make that for certain that was gonna happen, I was moving kind of slow to get up and do our outline.
Right.
So I guess, but I think it's just a matter of we took such a long hiatus. I need to get back to catching a rhythm. But nonetheless, when I started watching this episode, I was like, oh, it's this one. This one's cool. So
yes,
I was excited.
Exactly. So if you guys don't know, Rolly is referring to today's episode. It is season 2, episode 16. It's called Homecoming, and it is a big, important episode, and you'll see why in just a minute. But before we get to that, I would like to remind everybody to please like, share, subscribe, and rate. Once again, it's the point of the show where I ask that of you. So if you haven't already done that, please help us out. So as I said, today's episode was an important one. We'll get to that. But before we do, Rolly, what's happening around the galaxy?
Let's see what's happening this week in Star Wars.
So I think the thing that everybody's talking about this week in Star Wars is definitely the latest episode of The Bad Batch. So I just want to jump right into that. It was episode 3. We got the first 2 episodes in one day last week. This one's called The Solitary Clone. And the big surprise that I don't know about you, Pete, but it totally caught me off guard was we got Commander Cody back. Yeah. And what was crazy to me right off the bat was, like, I think why I was caught off guard was we were talking last year on how we potentially expected him to show up in the Kenobi show, which didn't end up being true. And sure enough, he shows up in animated, which was really cool because obviously, you know, me and Pete are really big animated fans. We're here doing a Star Wars Rebels podcast. It wasn't what I was expecting to get Cody back. And I was like super jacked when he shows up and the episode progresses. And sure enough, we get all these questions answered. Hey, where's Cody during all this stuff that's happening post Order 66?
Right. Give the listeners a little background as to why the question was so prominent of what happened to Cody, or where did he end up?
Well, for starters, like everybody out there that's a big fan of the Clone Wars like we are, is we get so many questions answered with Rex, and then Rex shows up, sure enough, as you guys have seen here in Rebels. But Cody was a big question mark because he was Obi-Wan's clone commander, the same way Rex was Anakin and Ahsoka's. And Cody is the one that actually orders the kill shot on Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith. As we know, Obi-Wan survives, but I'd like to think that in Cody's mind, he took care of business and he was possibly, you know, feeling remorse for killing Obi-Wan Kenobi. But Cody, under the influence of a Jedi, I would have just assumed that he would have gone AWOL, so to say, the way Rex does.
Right. But
we don't know that. And I was expecting him to see him show up in Obi-Wan, potentially still under the Empire, which we do end up seeing in this episode. But sure enough, we kind of see, how do I phrase this? We kind of see where Cody's story is going to go now, potentially a spin-off, if I might throw that out there.
Okay.
But yeah, Cody was prominent because, in my opinion, he ranks just as high as Rex. And most Star Wars fans are really big fans of Rex, so people wanted questions answered about Cody.
Okay, so I mean, he's back, and that was the big thing, the big reveal from here. But more in line with the background of the show, of the episode, was Crosshair. It was all about Crosshair, basically, and about what happened to him after the season 1 finale. And it was revealed that he was actually left there for 32 rotations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So basically it was like The rest of the Bad Batch or Omega didn't show up in this episode at all. So that was, I really enjoyed that it was like centrally focused on Crosshair and what happened to him afterwards, and the fact that he's still looked at as kind of an outsider, even though, you know, he's obviously proven himself to the Empire. He's still looked at now at this point as like a lone wolf kind of thing, where they don't trust him to be in charge of any kind of squad, but he can definitely be put on special assignments, is kind of what I got from it.
Yeah, and what I found really interesting was the opening scene with Crosshair, where he's going to sit in the rec room, the cafeteria area, and he sits with those two clone troopers. Mind you, those are clones, and they kind of look at him in a way that they're kind of like disgusted, and they get up with their trays and move to another table. So, What was your thoughts on that scene?
That they just kind of, even though that they're all clones, they all kind of look alike. He's still looked at as the outsider, as the freak, as the, you know, the how do I put this? Like literally he came out, he's part of the Bad Batch that came out of the clones. You know, he's still looked down upon, and it was just kind of one of those classic cliche scenes of like the new kid in class at the lunch table sits down, and the rest of them kind of get up and leave him alone because they don't want to be seen sitting with him. I don't know, just kind of like he is still an outcast, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Gotcha. Yeah, that one I was kind of confused about because obviously I got the connection from the first season in the first episode where the Bad Batch sits together kind of like on their own at the cool kids table, so to say, in that same room. But in this one I was a little bit confused with that reaction that the clones gave him. Like if they were like newly volunteer stormtroopers, then obviously I would have understood, but that wasn't the case. So I was kind of a bit thrown off with that one. But nonetheless, yeah, I agree with you. I love the fact that this was a Crosshair only episode. It's in the name, the solitary clone. I think without a doubt, Crosshair is definitely my favorite of the Bad Batch as far as, you know, character development, personality. He's the bad guy of the group, so therefore I think you expect to get the most out of him, more so than you would, let's say, Echo and Tech. As much as I love those guys, they're just, I mean, let's face it, they're not Crosshair. No, they're not. Yeah, no, I obviously it's long since documented that I will always root for the bad guy. So he was always kind of the standout for me from season 1, but this episode really gave a lot of background to it. And now I kind of want a t-shirt that just simply says, "Good soldiers follow orders." I think that's a really, really like badass line, especially, you know, given the context of what it is. Yeah, and I also love, I didn't write this in the notes, but I'm kind of recalling the episode as we're talking. I loved how we got a throwback of the full-blown separatist army in the mission portion of this episode. You saw every version of every droid that was thrown at us in Clone Wars. So I thought that was really cool to go down kind of like memory lane there with Cody at the helm also. Right. So yeah, basically there's a mission where Cody's teaming up with Crosshair to try and accomplish something. We're not going to have to go over the whole thing, but at the end there's a really cool moment where Cody and Crosshair have a little meeting at the end where it's kind of like Cody says, you know, the whole good soldiers follow orders, and he kind of tells him, you know, but not in these words, but basically like, you know, but at what cost? You know, like what are you actually gaining from blindly following orders? And then he walks away later to find out that Cody actually went AWOL, which is kind of cool. So that's kind of what you were saying about a possible Cody spinoff. That'd be great to see where he went when he finally, you know, left the ranks. Yeah, and it's funny because I was talking to friends about that specific scene after we all watched it, and he was telling me that he thinks we're going to get Cody back again in this season with Rex, considering that Rex is AWOL. His point was, who else would Cody know to seek out that is also AWOL, and it'd be Rex. And obviously we know, I think Rex showed up in the trailers. I don't recall, but obviously I think we kind of get some implication from last season, at least, that Rex is going to be back in the picture. I mean, if we're talking about the Bad Batch, you know, realizing that they need to do more to fight against the Empire besides just taking missions from Sid, I think, you know, they do go to Rex, and maybe potentially Cody is there already. And this is where the jumping of timelines confuses someone like me, because the Bad Batch takes place, give me in the movie timeline, where does that take place? Bad Batch season 1 takes place immediately amidst Revenge of the Sith, because in the first season of the Bad Batch, we actually see the Emperor give Order 66.
Okay.
Yes.
So I guess how close to the Kenobi series would this be happening, if you had to guess? And I asked for a reason. The reason I ask is because in the Kenobi series, we see, I'm forgetting his last name, but Tamora Morrison, the guy who plays all the clones, he shows up in Kenobi as an old, broken down, shaggy bearded clone. So that's obviously set after the clones have been, basically forgotten about and retired or whatever.
Yeah,
so,
decommissioned.
Right, decommissioned. Thank you. So if in this, how close to that is that? That's what really threw me off, was the fact that if you notice at the end of this episode, there's this new set of stormtroopers that show up, and if I'm not mistaken, their helmets are different.
Yes.
Okay, so those are closer to what? Those are closer to the current the traditional stormtroopers, or more like because if I'm not mistaken, they kind of look like the New Order stormtrooper helmets, like from
the First Order.
The First Order, thank you, from the sequel trilogy. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, when I saw those helmets, the way that I interpreted it is here's the evolution of going from a clone trooper to a stormtrooper. They haven't finalized the design of the armor, if you want to call it that, which we know stormtrooper is not armor, it's just glorified plastic.
Right.
That's kind of how I saw it when I saw the helmet. Like, the clones obviously have a very particular helmet, and then when I saw these new helmets, it's like, okay, obviously they're trying to redefine that these are stormtroopers and they're not clone troopers. But I guess I just took it as the design's not final. So I mean, I see it the same way as in Attack of the Clones, when we first see all the clones show up, they're all exactly the same. They're all like white only. Mm-hmm. And then when we get to Revenge of the Sith, you start seeing the colors, signifying different ranks, different, I guess, groups. I forget what the military word is for that. So that's kind of how I saw this version of the Stormtrooper. This is the first iteration of the Stormtrooper armor. And it might be that they're still using clone armor, considering that they're still using clones, and they haven't fully gotten away from that. So that's my opinion on it. If anybody else has any ideas or knows more, please let us know in the comments. Okay,
yeah, I got to go back and watch it, because I'm really like I'm a helmet kind of a nerd, so I really, that struck me as, oh my god, like I thought that it was a natural transition from the clone helmet to the stormtrooper helmet from the original trilogy that we know and love, but this one was a different design. And what struck me was it really reminded me of the First Order helmets from the sequel trilogy. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, maybe they went into this design and then they updated it to the traditional stormtrooper, and then when the First Order came around, they went back to this unused design that was only around for a while. I don't know, I'm really dissecting it a little bit too far. But anyway, really cool episode. I enjoyed it a lot. It was pretty cool. I really enjoyed the Crosshair centric episode.
I'm curious to see where we go with Crosshair here, because at the end, when he finds out that Cody was AWOL, it's almost like they're just zoomed in on him, showing him thinking like, what's next for me? Do good soldiers really follow orders when they know that the orders are wrong? Do I go back to my brothers, or do I continue here with the Empire, where this Imperial commander is telling me face to face how worthless clones are to him? What's the incentive for me to stick around?
Right. So exactly.
We'll see what happens.
Pretty cool episode, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on from the Bad Batch for this week in Star Wars, we had one important birthday. I rephrase that. One standout birthday. I don't know how best to say that. I don't want to leave anybody out of the loop in case there was other birthdays. But the big name was Carl Weathers, January 14th. He plays Greef Karga in the Mandalorian series. And I think he's probably going to show up in this upcoming season 3, if I'm not mistaken.
I really hope so. I love seeing Carl Weathers in anything, really. He's a pretty iconic kind of a sidekick character from the 80s, and he's just kind of been consistent leading up to that. And I can't discount, like, he was a huge standout. I'm a Arrested Development nerd, so like he was part of Arrested Development in a small way, but it was a very significant way. So I love Carl Weathers, and happy birthday to him.
Yes, happy birthday.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this week in Star Wars. Then let's get into this week's episode of Rebels. Rolly, why don't you hit us with a synopsis of this week's episode?
So in this week's episode, the Ghost Crew joins forces with Cham Syndulla, father of Hera and Clone Wars legend. But will his thirst for revenge and fractured relationship with his daughter cost the rebels a victory?
Absolutely. So we said this was a big episode, and it was a big episode for a reason. It's called Homecoming, and it's really because it reunites Hera with her father, which was kind of a shocker. But the show opens up with the Phoenix Squadron attempting to pass cargo to another rebel cell, with an Imperial Star Destroyer hot on their tail. As soon as they pass off the cargo, a damaged A-Wing attempts to dock with Phoenix Squadron to make the jump to hyperspace, but is shot down by the Empire. The Phoenix Squadron has no choice but to make the jump to hyperspace, losing yet another member of their squad. Hera has a meeting with Sato and the crew, and Hera says, "At best, our squadron is at half strength. We're not just losing fighters, we're losing pilots faster than we can replace them." Kanan says, "Until we can find a base, we need somewhere to land our fighters." And Sato says, "Perhaps we can solve two problems at once. A rebel cell has reported an Imperial character over their world. If we can steal that ship, we can use it to house all of our fighters. The cell is located in the Ryloth system." Hera says, "Ryloth? I know the cell you're talking about. I'll contact them." And Kanan says, "You're actually going to talk to him?" And Hera says, "I don't think we have much of a choice. We need that carrier." And Hera proceeds to contact her father, a Clone Wars hero named Cham Syndulla on the Ghost HoloNet. Rolly, why is Hera's father a Clone Wars hero?
I don't recall if it's in the first or second season of Clone Wars, but we see that aid is sent to Ryloth, and Hera's father is basically like a military general, for all intents and purposes, on Ryloth. So when the Jedi and the Republic show up to aid Ryloth, he is a standout character in that arc, because I think it's like 3 to 4 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends up becoming, a heroic figure for all the citizens of Ryloth, all the Twi'leks, to be specific.
Okay.
So that's an episode, an arc I honestly do need to go back and rewatch. We do get more of Hera's family in the Bad Batch season 1. If you guys recall, she does show up in that. So and that was actually the first time we met Hera's mother, who is referenced to later in this episode.
Right.
So yeah, basically war hero from the Clone Wars, and now that the Empire is in control, he still remains that figure because they're being oppressed by the Empire. So he's leading the people of Ryloth to fight back against them.
Gotcha.
So as this episode continues, Hera proceeds to have a conversation with Cham over HoloNet, and that conversation leads to Cham and 2 of his soldiers meeting with Hera and the rebels on the Ghost. Kanan is visibly nervous about meeting Cham for reasons that are still unsaid in the show, but basically this is his quote-unquote future father-in-law, so to say.
Right. Yeah.
So they're walking to meet Cham and the other Twi'leks, and he's just visibly like nervous. He begins to ask Ezra, he's like, "How do I look? Do I look good?" And Ezra's like, "Yeah, well, why does that matter?" And then he's like, nothing. And then he tells Ezra, "You need to straighten up, look presentable." So it just acts like real dorky, very nervous, because he's, for all intents and purposes, like I said, meeting his father-in-law, even though it's not been said anything official.
Right.
So the Ghost Crew meets up with Cham and the other Twi'leks, and Cham says, "Ah, you must be the Jedi I've heard about." And Kanan says, Kanan Jarrus, I've heard a lot about you too, sir. This is the rest of our crew, Ezra, Sabine, and Zeb." And what's funny is when he says that, he points to all the wrong people. I think when he says Ezra, he's pointing to Sabine, and then Sabine, he's pointing to Zeb, and so forth. So he's clearly still nervous as he's talking to his quote-unquote father-in-law.
Right.
And Cham says, "A fine group of fighters you have. Cham Syndulla at your service." Sabine says, "The liberator of Ryloth. I studied your Clone War tactics at the Academy," obviously referring to the Imperial Academy. Cham says, "Yes, the Empire is still trying to figure out how to beat me. These are 2 of my finest warriors, Numa and Gobi." Hera says, "Well, we should get to the briefing. There's a lot to do." So then this scene cuts to the briefing room where they're officially like strategizing for what they're going to do. And Hera says, "The Empire has a light carrier in orbit over Ryloth they used to bomb the Twi'lek rebels. The ship's well defended, but we can get aboard using the stolen bomber while the squadron is away. One team secures the hangar, the other storms the bridge. Then we jump out before they figure out what hit them. And Cham responds, no, this monstrosity has rained destruction and death on the citizens of Ryloth. It is not enough that it simply disappears. My people need to see it fall from the sky in flames as a symbol of our strength. So I recommend a change in plans. Using my bomber, schematics, and timetables, we can destroy the carrier when it's most vulnerable. Hera says, if you could have destroyed it, you would have done so already. You need us, and we need the carrier. Kanan says, we need each other. Cham's intel, Hera's plan, this works, we all win. Cham responds, very well. With Jedi on our side, how can we fail? So after that scene, we cut to a scene where I guess Hera is doing upkeep repairs on Chopper in one of the side rooms on the Ghost, and Ezra's with her because he wants to ask her more about the relationship she's having or she has with her father. So Ezra says, hey, what's going on between you and your father? Hera responds, we haven't spoken in years. He was a hero in the Clone War, fought with the Jedi to free Ryloth from the droid army, but after the war, the Republic became the Empire and refused to leave, so he started fighting them. Once my mother was killed in the Resistance, Ryloth's freedom became the most important thing to him. And Ezra says, more important than family? And when he says that, Cham enters the room, and he tells them, it's almost time, we should head out soon. And Ezra looks back at Hera and says, well, there's nothing more important to me, as he leaves the room. And then we get a brief conversation with Cham and Hera, a very interesting one at that. And Cham says, is that the old astromech you found during the Clone War? And Hera goes, his name is Chopper. Cham says, if you gave me half the attention you gave this second-rate junk pile, we'd have liberated Ryloth by now. This is what's wrong with you, child. You hold on to the wrong things, devote your time and effort to lost causes. What a waste. And Hera starts becoming angry as he's talking down to her like this. And as she says the next lines, her voice actually starts changing. Yes. She says, I'm not wasting my life. I help people. I lead ships into battle. I am part of something bigger, the rebellion. And when I say voice changing, she actually starts talking in a Twi'lek accent.
Yes.
Which is the first time you hear Hera talk like this. And let me finish the line and then we'll go back and talk about that. Cham says, I thought you knew better than to put your faith in outsiders. You forget what happened when we trusted the Republic. Hera says, this is different. The rebels are fighting to free everyone. Cham says, free everyone? I don't care about everyone. I care only about Ryloth. And Hera responds, so I've noticed. So the first thing I thought when I saw this episode is I remember Pete messaged me when he first saw Rebels, and he's like, wait a minute, why is Hera's voice different in this one scene?
Yes.
And I remember when I first saw Rebels, I thought the same thing. And I told Pete, and this is, I don't think there's an official answer for this, but the best thing I can tell you guys is, to me, it's kind of like, you know, in our culture, we're Hispanics. If your first language is Spanish, and then you go off into the world and you start speaking better English, right? When you go back with your family and they start getting under your skin or something like that, the Latino in you starts coming out and you potentially start talking in Spanish to them. And that's kind of exactly what happens here. Hera has been away from Ryloth and her family for so long. She's amongst new family and friends, and she just acquires a different accent, like a more natural, like humanoid accent, so to say, in the Star Wars universe. Right. Well, in the Twi'leks from Ryloth, they kind of have like a French accent. So as she starts getting emotional talking to her father here, that accent starts coming out until the very end, where she calms down and says, so I've noticed. And that's kind of like the last we hear of that accent. But I thought it was a really cool touch to it, because it again further shows you how distant Hera has become from her family. Right. And sure enough, when she shows up in the Bad Batch season 1, she's talking in the Ryloth accent because she's still there. She's not part of this rebellion just yet that doesn't exist yet.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah, that was a really interesting little. I really like that detail where, like you said, she was talking to her father, so it was like she kind of slipped back into the accent. So very nice little touch.
So as the episode continues, Cham and the rebels head to Ryloth with the stolen TIE bomber in tow. Kanan and Cham exchange Clone War stories, while Hera is visibly annoyed at how Kanan is speaking with her father. Kanan's talking to Cham kind of like sucking up, so to say. He wants to be in good graces with his quote-unquote father-in-law. And as Hera's just listening, she's just annoyed. She even like closes the door to where they're sitting on the ship.
Right.
Kanan comes back and is like super excited to tell her how much he likes Hera's father, and Hera's like, well, that makes one of us basically, and then she shuts the door back on them again. So as the rebels approach the Imperial carrier, Hera and the crew join the TIE bombers that are deployed to Ryloth in order to sneak towards the carrier on the stolen TIE bomber that they have. Once they're in position, Hera calls for the two A-wings to pretend to attack them so that they can request an emergency landing onto the carrier itself. After successfully crash landing, Cham and his soldiers stun and handcuff the Ghost crew as they intend to follow through with Cham's original plan of blowing up the carrier. So we kind of see Cham and his crew start setting up, their plan of attack on the base, while back on the ship the rebels are knocked out. I think Chopper's the first one that wakes up. He wakes up Hera and alerts them that Cham's taken over and now he's gonna execute his own plan. Mm-hmm. So as the rebels are waking up, they immediately create a new plan to intercept Cham and his soldiers before they can blow up the ship. Sabine and Zeb are tasked with neutralizing the Twi'leks while the rest of the team head to the bridge to commandeer the ship. Sabine and Zeb are able to neutralize Cham's soldiers successfully, but are unable to locate Cham. The rebels do end up getting to the bridge, as Ezra Jedi mind tricks the captain to convince the Imperials to abandon ship due to a fire. And with the ship secured, Hera orders Chopper to take the ship to hyperspace, but it's intercepted by Cham. Chopper tells Hera he can't make the jump as the hyperdrive is offline, and it is revealed by Cham that he was the one that disabled the ship's hyperdrive. So that scene was actually really cool because apparently it's the first time we see Ezra attempt to Jedi mind trick. And when he first does it, the Imperial's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I basically just told you this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
He does it again, and he's able to do it, and basically he convinces that Imperial officer to tell the entire Imperial carrier that there's a fire and they need to abandon the ship. So pretty cool little scene. So once they start abandoning ship, the light cruiser that's nearby that carrier notices what's happening, and they clearly know something's up because there's no reason for them to abandon the ship. So they immediately deploy backup reinforcements to go intercept the rebels that are attempting to steal the ship. So Hera and the rebels definitely know this. They've been on so many missions against the Empire. They know the Empire always has a backup plan, and they implore Cham to work with them, as those reinforcements are very nearby and they're already on their way. They're about to land. Mm-hmm. Kanan tells Cham, we don't have time for this. Imperial reinforcements will be coming. Hera says, destroy the ship and the Empire will just send another. But if we take it, we can use it to fight them. Cham says, you haven't been here to see what the Empire has done to our world. They plunder our wealth and sell our people into slavery. The ship must burn for all Ryloth to see. Hera responds, I want freedom from the Empire as badly as you, but this battle can't be won on Ryloth alone. During the Clone War, you didn't just fight for a village, you rallied everyone to liberate the entire planet. You inspired me. The rebellion is no different, but either you couldn't see that or you just didn't believe in me, and that's why I left. And that scene was really cool because she's on comm still with the other unit where Sabine and Zeb have captured Gobi and Numa, and you can tell that those Twi'leks that are under Cham, they're starting to take in the words to heart that Hera is saying. And Ezra proceeds to respond, she's right, we have the ship. We just have to buy her enough time to get us out of here. And then we cut to Gobi and Numa, who are being held captive. Gobi stands up and he says, I'm with you, Hera. And Numa stands up and also says, I'm also with you. And Hera says, well, father? And Cham says, I guess you have your chance to prove me wrong.
Really powerful scene right there, like where basically Hera steps up and voices exactly what I guess she's been trying to say forever to her father, and made it clear to the point where not only did he understand, but also the other Twi'leks on there, Gobi and Numa, also understood. So I really like this interaction because it really showed Hera's evolution as what the next phase of this rebellion member of the rebellion was going to be. I don't know. I'm not wording it right, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're just kind of reiterating too why, as we're doing this podcast, why Hera became such a favorite of mine, like top two. Kanan and Hera are my favorite rebel members, and it seems like this, where they show her why she was made a captain, why she is such a huge leader for the rebellion. Mind you, Rebels is the first time we see Hera, but going forward after this, we're definitely going to see more. Like, we're going to see her in the Ahsoka show. We're going to see what larger role she has with the Rebel Alliance, not just with the Phoenix Squadron, but the overall alliance. And I love these scenes, and it just paints such a big picture of how important Hera is to the crew besides just being a pilot. So Chopper shows Cham how to fix the hyperdrive while the rebels defend against the incoming reinforcements. Bombers returning from Ryloth go on the offense against the stolen Imperial carrier, as Hera and the team manage to defend, but not without some bombs hitting the carrier first. Cham helps Hera to stabilize the damaged ship and save it. Meanwhile, the remaining light cruiser goes on the offense against the carrier. Sabine creates a plan to deploy a loaded bomber towards them filled with explosives, and Cham blasts the bomber near the cruiser, causing the cruiser to explode. And in doing so, Cham has given Ryloth the visual victory in space he wanted, while at the same time helping his daughter's rebels complete their mission. So as the show ends, we see the rebels jump to hyperspace now after a successful mission with the stolen carrier, and they regroup with the Phoenix Squadron with the newly acquired Imperial carrier. Cham addresses Hera and the rebels one final time before leaving back to Ryloth. Cham says, "I'm getting reports from all over Ryloth. Our people are rallying against the Empire. Every hour, more join our ranks." Kanan says, "I'm glad to hear it, sir." And Cham looks at Hera and says, "Daughter, may we speak? When you left, I was heartbroken, but now I understand. You're like your mother. She was once a dreamer too." Hera says, "But I learned to be a leader by watching you." And as they embrace, Cham says, "I am proud of you, Captain Syndulla."
Yeah, man. It was, again, one of those moments where an animated show really hits home as far as real life. You know, there's a lot of instances where we have tension with our parents because they may not approve of the job, the lifestyle that we're leading, whatever. They just may not approve. Or I guess it goes back to when you are a parent, you create this narrative of what your child is going to become. And in most cases, it's narcissistically, it's going to become a slightly better version than you. You know, they're going to be little clones of you, for the no pun intended. But in this case, it really showed that she went in a direction that he was not expecting, that he did not approve of. But now with this episode, she proved to him that her choices that she made are hers, A, and B, they were the right ones for her. And he was very accepting. And not only that, again, anytime someone calls her Captain Syndulla, like, it really, like, there's a beat in the show where it really solidifies just how important she is to this rebellion. And I thought it was a great episode, great way to end it.
Yeah, very straightforward. We don't have a lot of like crossover plot lines that are occurring in here. A very Hera-centric episode. We get the call back to the Clone Wars with Cham showing up. But these are probably my favorite episodes, to be honest. They're not fillers, in my opinion. They're, okay, let's focus on a character and let's dive deeper into them. So while it might seem brief, I think our episode today is going to be brief. Nonetheless, it was a great episode, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of our recap, and great episode. It was not a filler, just like you said. I think you hit it right on the head. So I want to remind everyone to please, once again, like, share, subscribe, and rate. Any closing comments?
No, I think I gave my closing comments there on my thoughts on the episode. But
I think so too. So if anybody else has any comments or questions or concerns, please drop us a line and let us know about them, and we will be glad to look at them and work them into the outline of our show. So next episode is going to be called Season 2, Episode 17. It's called The Honorable Ones, and I look forward to seeing exactly what that is about. So if nothing else, then Rolly, this was, like I said, a very good, very concise episode, but very important episode. I really enjoyed the interaction between Hera and her father. So again, look forward to next week. And if nothing else, this has been the end of our Good Morning Lothal, the unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast episode. So thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it. This has been your host, Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora.
saying, "May the Force be with you always." Goodbye from Lothal.